Welcome, everyone. My name is David Pettyjohn. I am the Executive Director of the Idaho Humanities Council, and I want to thank you for joining us for our weekly Connected Conversations program. Just before we begin tonight, I want to remind everybody that we will be taking questions, and you can do that by either using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, or you can just simply type your question into the Q&A feature as well. So joining us tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce a colleague as well as a friend, Michael Faison. He is the Executive Director of the Idaho Commission on the Arts. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Very well, David. It's good to be here tonight to see you and to speak with our friends of arts and humanities.
Yeah. So October is National Arts and Humanities Month. It has been that way since 1993. And as we were planning our, programs for the month, I thought, wouldn't it be great to invite Michael and he and I would just have a conversation about the arts and humanities in Idaho and why they are so important. And also give a little bit of background, how we came to be. So what we're going to do is we'll have a presentation that kind of walks everybody through our origin stories. We'll each talk a little bit and then we'll kind of engage in a discussion. But before we do that, Michael, would you mind just giving a very brief introduction, kind of a little bit of your background?
Sure, David. So today I am the director of the Idaho Commission on the Arts. I come from an arts and sciences family. I previously was with the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, running the arts and education programs across the state. We placed 350 teaching artists in schools across Pennsylvania. It was very exciting work. I was with the Oregon Arts Commission. I was a high school art and design teacher in Austin, Texas for many years, as well as an illustrator and photographer and an avid motorcyclist.
Yes, you are. So I do think that's interesting how, you come to your position with the experience of working for other, arts commissions. I also, came to the Idaho Humanities Council. I worked for the Oklahoma Humanities Council for several years. And I know one of my colleagues, Cindy Wang, worked for the Kansas Humanities Council. So I think it really is kind of nice, kind of bringing in those different, programs and ideas here to Idaho. But we're very lucky to have you here, Michael. So
thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead and begin our presentation. So you're joining us tonight to talk about the arts and humanities in Idaho. This is a photo that was taken of a Museum on Main Street exhibit opening, and I thought it was really reflective of kind of the arts and humanities with this, I believe, Nez Perce child, showcasing his culture through his adornment and other artistic venues. So let's kind of start at the beginning, so to speak. So how did the Idaho Commission on the Arts and the Idaho Humanities Council come to be? Well, it all really kind of began at President Lyndon Johnson's State of the Union address on January the 5th of 1965. Interesting fact, this was the first State of the Union broadcast on television. And Lyndon Johnson realized that this was a great opportunity to reach a lot of people. And it is at this State of the Union that he talked about his Great Society agenda. And one of the things he discussed was the creation of a national foundation on the arts to recognize the artistic achievements of Americans. He didn't mention the humanities in that State of the Union speech. Well, Senator Claiborne Pell from Rhode Island and Representative William Moorhead from Pennsylvania realized that the humanities also needs to be a part of this conversation. So they crafted legislation together and then pushed it through, not really worked it through both houses of Congress to also create a national foundation on the humanities. Well, realizing that the momentum was there, they brought them together. And that resulted in the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act that was signed by President Johnson on September the 29th of 1965. And here is a photo of him giving remarks before the actual signing of that document. If you haven't had a chance to read this document, I highly recommend it. It's very powerful. Those of you who receive our newsletter, I actually quoted it in my little article that I put in because I find it very comforting. And just a few of the passages I just want to briefly touch upon. It talks about how the arts and the humanities reflect the high place accorded by the American people to our rich cultural heritage and to fostering of mutual respect for the diverse beliefs and values of all persons and groups. And democracy also demands wisdom and vision in its citizen. So therefore, it must foster and support a form of education and access to the arts and the humanities designed to make people of all backgrounds and wherever located masters of their technology and not its unthinking servants. Let's also remember the 60s were the space age. So technology was really kind of moving over, taking over the conversation. And this was a way of saying, we human beings have these achievements that need to be recognized as well beyond technology. So the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities resulted in the creation of two separate endowments. We work together, but we are two distinct separate endowments. And it's the National Endowment for the Arts and then the National Endowment for the Humanities. So to tell us how the Arts Commission on Idaho, Idaho Commission on the Arts came to be, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, David. So the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, of course, formed us all together. And I like to point out these quotes from George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, some of our founding fathers, to make the point that from its beginnings, our nation saw a place for the arts. And I would also argue that the arts and humanities are two children of the same mother. And George Washington and Jefferson both saw essential roles for the creative lives and the humanitarian lives of our nation. Next, please. So in 1966, a year after the foundation of the National Endowments of the Arts and Humanities, the Idaho Commission on the Arts was born, signed into law by Governor Smiley. But interestingly, again, being siblings together, arts and humanities, the Idaho Commission on the Arts was not formed independently of the humanities at that point, but actually together. These were seen together by the state of Idaho and inseparable at that time in 1966. It was only later in the early 70s when the Idaho Humanities Council was born as an entity, did that split take place. And so that in Idaho state government, the Idaho Commission on the Arts stayed in government while the Idaho Humanities Council then became a not-for-profit entity. Next, please. So the Idaho Commission on the Arts was charged by state law in statute to stimulate the study and presentation of the performing and fine arts, as they said at the time, and for the people to engage in the arts. And of course, we strive and insist on the freedom of artistic expression as being essential to the well-being of the arts, and I would say to society. So what do we do? What does the Idaho Commission on the Arts do? And I'll kick this off for David and I. The commission does support the vitality of the arts in Idaho in two very distinct ways. One through grant services and the other through non-granting professional services. But as for grants, and let's go to the next slide, we have some distinct granting programs. Probably the lion's share of our funding goes to support the public programs and projects of Idaho's nonprofit arts organizations. So this is through a program called Public Programs in the Arts, an entry track, and through what we call quick funds, grants that fund projects and programs of, say, small volunteer arts organizations across the state. Importantly, too, we support arts and education projects across the state, both in schools and community settings. And that's an area that is a particular love of mine, coming from teaching myself. And then, of course, we support artist fellowships, recognizing excellence in the arts in all disciplines. And again, something very exciting that happened only in the last year. We finally got approval in the last year to make fellowships in folk and traditional arts as well. And this year, fiscal year 21, were the first fellowships we've been able to make in that. It's very, very exciting. We also exciting, help carry on the traditions of the arts and trades and occupations, traditional occupations of Idaho. So through apprenticeships, we link up master artists and artisans with apprentices to carry on these traditions, whether Norwegian rose mauling, Western saddle making, hat making. And again, this is a very clearly a crossover here in arts and humanities. You cannot separate them when you talk about history and heritage in the arts. And then finally, an area of grant making that is not as sexy, but necessary to help our artists and our arts managers to thrive. Professional development and technical assistance grants. To technical assistance for organizations to bring in consultants for issues they face, or professional development for artists. How about an actor who needs to learn some stage combat techniques, or a writer to do some research? And again, you're talking about literature, you're talking about the crossover between arts and humanities. So we're very, I think we have a pretty good portfolio of grant making. So non-granting services. This is an area that we're not as well known for, but in fact, they're really quite essential to the vitality of the arts in the state. And if I can have the next slide. So here are things that artists and arts managers might know about, but people don't, again, associate us with. So the Idaho Change Leader Program. This is a collaborative professional development program for arts managers. Collaborative as in Utah and Colorado both work with us together in a tri-state union of the Change Leader Program, in which we help arts managers to learn change management techniques and organizational management techniques, how to run groups, how to initiate change in your community, but do it in a productive way, how to run an organization, how to do board leadership. These are the things that the Change Leader Program assists arts managers with. It's really quite important work within organizations, and we fund it across the state. We have people across the state in this program. The My Entrepreneur Program. This is an exciting new one. We believe in stealing from the best. So we stole, I should say, we actually collaborated with our peers in Montana where this originated. My Entrepreneur is a program that helps working artists to learn how to monetize and be better business people in their art if they want to make a living doing it. And this is frankly a college level curriculum in arts business management for individual artists. It's very exciting. And it's had very good effect in Montana over many years. And we've now been doing this for about 2 years. And we're very hopeful that it's going to make a meaningful difference in the businesses of artists. Our Writer in Residence program. Now, that is, again, a very clear crossover with the humanities, a state writer in residence. That writer in residence would normally be across the state right now, going to libraries and community centers, doing readings and literary workshops. Well, we know that's not happening this year. So this year, a nice little innovative thing, and my staff and our current writer in residence came up with this. This was brilliant. Writers in residences. We have pen pal relationships with writers across the state, all being sort of managed by our state writer in residence. And it's very exciting, and we'll see where it takes us. Who knows, maybe we'll continue to do this after the age of the pandemic is over. Poetry Out Loud, again, an arts and humanities combo, if I ever saw one. the National Poetry Recitation Contest. Very exciting. We manage it here for Idaho. I know, David, you managed this yourself at Humanities in Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, I got to MC a couple of them.
Very cool. So you have young poets and reciting the classics of the English language, and then competing across the state in their schools, and finally in state finals, and then competing with their state champions from across the nation in Washington, D.C. each spring. Very exciting. And this year, past year, because they couldn't convene in D.C., the National Endowment for the Arts, who sponsors this with the Poetry Foundation, actually had the students writing their own original poetry and competing with that at a distance via Zoom. It was an exciting change. Again, you make something good out of a complicated situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Master to master traditional arts convenings. The masters of these trades and occupations, the silver engravers, hat makers, saddle makers, rawhide braiders, bringing them together so that they can learn from each other in their trades and also share business information so that they can remain viable going into the future. And again, here we have arts and humanities together. They're inseparable. And the community scholar program, again, a very much a humanities sort of affair here, where helping people to learn how to document their own local community assets in arts and humanities and history, so that they can take ownership of their own history in their community. And all we do is help them with the tools and techniques so that they can make it their own. And then new, only under construction as we speak, community cultural planning services. Through our latest planning process, it was very clear that most of the dreams and aspirations of people in the arts across Idaho could be fulfilled with their own community cultural planning at home, having all the stakeholders coming together and figuring this out together, what they want to make happen in their home. And we're starting down that road now, learning how to help communities to do their own community cultural planning, whether it's private stakeholders across the city or them and the cities or counties themselves, so that even cities and counties can have cultural plans within their comprehensive plans, which is a beautiful, fully unified community plan. So those are some of the non-granting services that we provide. Oh, and let me say, and it's not on that list because it merges grants and non-granting services. We actually work with organizations today also in how to manage cash flow, to understand what the cash flow curves are, how to manage them, how to forecast them so that they don't have a cash crisis unexpectedly. And we all know how important that is right now.
Yeah.
So David, there you go.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. We'll talk more later kind of about our kind of shared kind of experiences, as well as programs that really kind of cover both arts and humanities. So as Michael said, after the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act took place, here in Idaho, it was a state art and humanities council. Well, when the NEH decided that they wanted to do state-based humanities programming, they looked at several models. And one of the models was a state agency, much like the arts councils and commissions. And then others were working with universities. And then a separate not-for-profit. Eventually, it was determined that the separate not-for-profit model worked best. So in Idaho, there were a group of individuals who applied for a planning grant and received it in 1973. And we started out as the Association for the Humanities in Idaho. This is an article from the Statesman. You can see some of the names that were involved in that, including Alice Dieter and Charles Wright, as well as Judy Austin, some really leading individuals in the area. helped the establishment of our organization. We remained the Association for the Humanities in Idaho until 1986, when we changed our name to the Idaho Humanities Council. So very briefly, this is our mission: to deepen public understanding of human experience by connecting people with ideas. And our vision states that the humanities inspire a more literate, tolerant, and intellectually inquisitive Idaho citizenry, better able to embrace life's possibilities. I love that intellectually inquisitive. It kind of ties into the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities, talking about how democracy demands wisdom. So I think that's a really great term. So in 1986, we changed our name to the Idaho Humanities Council, and then we also were donated our house, our current headquarters, right here on the left, located in downtown Boise. A lawyer by the name of Guy Hurlbutt donated the equity in the house to the IHC. And for many years, the Idaho Centennial Commission resided here in the house to help pay the restoration cost, mortgage. And then IHC moved in 1991. And then a couple years ago, we renamed the house Ardinger House in honor of my predecessor, Rick Ardinger. And here he is with his wife, Rosemary, at the official dedication of Ardinger House. So we offer a variety of programs, somewhat similar to Michael's. We have, a grant program I'll talk about here in a bit. But then we also have several council-conducted programs. One of our most well-known is a Summer Teachers Institute. Several years ago, actually almost 20 years ago, we received a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to raise an endowment to provide these week-long, intense humanities-focused institutes to Idaho teachers. They take place every July. We have about 40 teachers that come in. This was in 2019. Unfortunately, our 2020 Institute, like many other things, was postponed. So we weren't able to hold it in person, but we are planning on coming back next year. But you can see we were focused on the centennial of women's suffrage. Another program we do is a museum on Main Street. We bring in a Smithsonian exhibit to a rural Idaho community that focuses on a specific topic, but it's more than just hosting an exhibit. It's a capacity building program as well. We provide training for all of the project directors. We provide booklets and publicity. We bring everybody together for workshops, and it's all free of charge. We charge a small fee to the community, like $200 to participate, but then everything else is covered. This is the grand opening of the latest one in Moscow, Crossroads, looking at rural America. It has since left the state, but we'll be bringing another museum on Main Street exhibit back in the years ahead. Subawards. We offer a wide variety of subawards across the state to support humanities-based programming. Here's a photo that was taken in Southeast Idaho of an exhibit that we funded, I believe at the Oregon Trail Center, California Trail Center in Montpelier. So we fund exhibits across the state, lectures, other discussions. We also provide assistance, to many organizations that you're familiar with, as well as many organizations that the Arts Commission supports as well. Just goes to show that mutual level of support that both of our organizations provide to the cultural, infrastructure here in the Gem State. We also, pre-pandemic, host these distinguished humanities lectures. We have them here in Boise, as well as in Idaho Falls and Coeur d'Alene. We bring in a nationally recognized speaker. These were from 2019. We had Douglas Brinkley in Idaho Falls, Richard Blanco here in Boise, and then Viet Thanh Nguyen up in Coeur d'Alene. And it's a wonderful opportunity for people to come, to network, hear from a great scholar, engage in a question and answer, as well as kind of visit with them afterwards. So like everything else, we've had to postpone those this year, but hope to come back in 2021. Speaking of, kind of what we are all kind of dealing with now, once this pandemic really became apparent, we here at the IHC, along with other organizations, we really started to explore virtual programming. It is something that we had talked about for years, but obviously it was imperative that we do them now. So these are the virtual programs. I mean, you're joining us tonight on one, Connected Conversations. We started with our dear pen friend. It's kind of like, your writers in residences, but, this dear pen friend connects Idahoans from across the state as a way to stay in touch, make a new friend, just using that wonderful craft of letter writing. We also have Humanities on the Home, which is just a list of resources for people on our website, and then Recipe Roundup, because we're home a lot now. We cook a lot of food. I've taken up bread baking. My waist doesn't appreciate it, but my husband does. And but it's great because the recipes have stories, and food is a way of coming together. So we've asked everyone to kind of submit their recipes and tell the stories behind them, and those are also available on our website. So now, Michael, I'll turn it over to you to talk about CARES Act. It's something that both of our organizations were involved in. So if you wouldn't mind kind of giving an overview of that.
Absolutely. So the CARES Act, Congress early in 2020 acted quickly at that time to try to stave off some of the dire economic circumstances arising from the economic shutdown of our nation mid-COVID. And 75 million of those funds were issued to the Idaho, not Idaho, I wish 75 million.
Yeah.
to the National Endowment for the Arts and 75 million to the National Endowment for the Humanities, for them to distribute across the country to help, in our case, to stave off some of the likely closures and loss of jobs in the arts due to COVID. So the endowment issued 60% of that as grants straight out from the National Endowment for the Arts to nonprofit arts organizations across the country to help stave off these losses. But then 40% of that, 75 million, went out to all the state arts agencies across the country, as is the practice of the National Endowment for the Arts, so that we as a state agency could then issue those as grants to the arts in Idaho. And we've already issued round one of those grants to, I believe, 69 organizations, professional arts organizations across the state. And you see 100 plus organizations there combine both the arts and humanities grants thus far with CARES Act funds to 25 counties in Idaho. So far totaling $652,000. And we know that's helpful. We know it can't make anyone whole, but we are helping. We are doing what we can to help. And it's helping to support jobs and activities in the arts and humanities. In the case of the arts, trying to hang on to positions and trying to keep organizations open so that they're still operating when we come out of the other side of this thing. And David, you could probably speak to some of the activities that the humanities are supporting through this.
Yeah, it was the same process as well. I mean, the NEH also sent 40% of that 75 million to the state and territorial councils. And we have had, I think, 8 rounds. We have a final round in a couple weeks. And really what made these grants unique from a federal funding viewpoint were 2 things. One, it specifically could cover overhead costs, salaries, and utilities, and it did not require a match. And that was incredibly beneficial to organizations across the state that really depend on in-person or admissions, fundraising events. And but as you said, Michael, I mean, the hurting is still there. I mean, this has helped, but these are organizations that still will need assistance.
Absolutely. It's critical. They still need more assistance than we could ever supply on our, but we will do what we can.
Yes. So we're very fortunate to have this. I mean, and I think that we're very thankful, for both the NEH and the NEA for, and I will say that every member of Idaho's federal and national delegation voted in favor of the CARES Act. So it really had that strong bipartisan support. So we're very, very thankful for that.
And let me say too that the National Endowment for the Arts, and I know it's the same with the National Endowment for Humanities, they are such good partners to us. They are, in fact, what I frequently call as the models of federalism in action. They delegate a great deal of initiative and authority to the states in an equal relationship, and it was demonstrated once again through the speed with which they were able to work with us for the CARES Act funds.
No, that's an excellent point. There aren't many organizations kind of like that. I completely agree with you. And I also like to point out that our relationship, with the arts and humanities here in Idaho is also very strong. We have a really fortunate experience here that I know might not necessarily be, is so strong in other states. So, okay, why should we study the arts and humanities, Michael?
Well, there are lots of good reasons for that. First of all, it's good for academic achievement. It just is. Even if you're not that interested in arts and humanities, although I have a feeling everybody on this call is. The fact is that students who study arts and humanities, they just do better in school. They score higher on the SAT, both in math and verbal, both. I can speak as one of the band kids and one of the art kids that was true. Basic skills are improved with study of the creative process in the classroom. Your basic analytical skills are better. Your abstract reasoning is superior, and because these are fostered in the creative process. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that discipline is better. I mean, I know this as a teacher, that kids who were engaged creatively were simply more functional in school. And I was on a call earlier today, we were talking about the fact that self-worth is important to actually feel worth for others. And that level of empathy is built through the artistic process. And that feeds on to the whole school environment. The school just works better. And you have fewer problems. You have students who are staying in school and achieving more. And I can tell you that students who are very high on that creative quotient end up in greater leadership positions in life generally.
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think one of the things you pointed out, the word empathy, I think is absolutely critical, not just now, but, really in every situation. When I've been asked to speak to college classes, they'll say, why should I take a humanities course? Or why should I study the liberal arts? I mean, kind of going to what you were saying, Michael, but it teaches you analytical thinking skills. It shows that you can learn, and so you can be a successful student or employee. It also helps you develop that global perspective by studying cultures throughout the world. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but it also helps you clarify your own values by comparing and contrasting them to what others have thought. And one of the things that I love, about the humanities is just continually finding that inspiration by some of the greatest minds and thoughts of the ages. And somebody described the humanities and the arts, as well, as this vast pool of knowledge that's free. I mean, everybody who's, kind of walked this earth before us, many of them have shared their thoughts, and that shared experience is accessible through the work that you do, through the work that we do, and it's free. And I think by kind of having those opportunities presented, it helps us develop that empathy to help us see the world through another person's eyes. And it's something that's valuable to teachers and employers as well.
Sure
So
is.
yes.
By the way, strong. Um, I can tell you that at Carnegie Mellon University, they've really fully integrated arts, humanities, and computer science.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
And as a result, they develop smarter code warriors, people who dream up the new ideas. They don't just regurgitate the old ones.
Yeah.
They have that mental discipline and maturity.
Right. So it's not only good for our soul, it's also good for the economy. So Michael, if you want to go ahead and talk about, some of these stats.
Absolutely, yes. Arts are good for business. In fact, they are just good business. Um, People might not realize that the cultural economy, the creative economy of America is 4.5% of the economy. It's worth $877 billion and over 5 million jobs, 900,000 of which are these core arts jobs themselves. The others being the jobs that are supported by the fact that this economy exists. U.S. wages, as you see here, are in excess of $400 billion in the creative economy. 68 billion directly within the arts themselves. And you take that down to Idaho, there's more here than people think. 2.8% of Idaho's economy is creative. That's a big deal. Over 20,000 jobs are supported by that creative economy. That matters in this state. And this state is good about being supportive of business, of small business, of creativity in the marketplace. So Idaho should be, and I would generally say is favorable to people working in a creative economy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the wages matter with 139 million just in the core jobs, but $1 billion in wages supporting Idaho's creative economy. It's a big deal.
It really is. And just to kind of, touch on that point, when you look at a dollar, that is spent on a ticket at a small venue, whether to go see a play or even, an exhibit or something like that, that is a $12. That $1 equals $12 in economic activity. When you look at restaurants, hotels, other things, which, like you alluded to, almost $279 million in a direct annual economic impact. And I think one of the things also, which is critical, is, and we'll kind of touch about this afterwards, kind of this rural-urban divide or other aspects, how culture or, the arts and humanities really tend to be concentrated more in the urban centers. Well, you and I have seen that that's not the case at all, especially here in Idaho. And the Governor's Association report of just last year talks about how these counties with performing arts organizations and other cultural organizations like museums and libraries, they experience population growth 3 times higher than those without them. And then with the design-driven business, they recovered more quickly from the recession, showing greater growth in weekly earnings. So that creative economy, which arts, humanities, cultural heritage tourism through historic preservation, those are really an economic driver all throughout the state. So here are our websites. You can obviously go to learn more about our individual organizations. But now I'm going to stop sharing the screen and we will open it up for questions. But before we start doing that, don't forget you can use it at the chat or the Q&A feature at the bottom. We've talked about the national origin story, and we talked about the local origin story. So Michael, I want to ask you about your individual origin story. When did you first become enamored with the arts?
I was I was raised in a military and science family. I grew up with the military. I grew up with inquiry and sciences and walls of books. Also with an old man who would never answer a question directly. If this boy had a question for him, he would say, well, boy, that's a good question. Let's look it up. And so I grew up with books in the home, but also, I mean, here was a family that lived in war, in warfare. And I think my parents and then all the people I knew also had a greater appreciation for what that means for civilization. And I worked for Governor Tom Ridge in Pennsylvania, and before he headed off to the new Homeland Security thing that had to happen in that time, he officiated over the Governor's Awards in the Arts in Allentown, Pennsylvania in October of 2001. And we had written a speech for him on arts and the economy, just as we had been discussing here. But we all knew at that moment that was not an important thing to discuss. There were bigger issues in play. And I mentioned this because he said something in his speech that was now completely extemporaneous because we didn't have time to rewrite a speech. And he spoke to something that has always lived with me since, that goes right back to why I love the arts, why growing up I had an old man who lived for art and music and literature. Governor Ridge said, it's about the soul of the Commonwealth. Who are we as a people? What do we stand for? And who tells our stories? Who tells our stories? And that's what resonated for me my entire life, with a father who loved art and music, and growing up with airplanes. I mean, what boy doesn't love airplanes? But it was in the home. It was nurtured from the beginning. And a home smells like a home if it smells like books. That's my origin story in this. And that I saw this as a natural mesh. And by the way, because he was also a scientist, the inquiry, the constant inquiry and questioning, which goes right back to humanities again.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I come from. And it feels like home to me.
That's good. No, that's good. It's good to feel at home, you know, when you can, you know, when you go to work every day. I mean, that's kind of a nice thing. And, you know, I'll say on my part, it really started with a bookshelf that we had in our home. And at the bottom of that bookshelf was an encyclopedia set. And this was well before the internet. And I just devoured, you know, it opened up a whole new world to me. I researched states and people and all sorts of new ideas and perspectives. And then whenever we would travel, one thing my parents always encouraged was that learning. And we'd go to local museums that were free. My parents didn't have, you know, enough kind of income to take us to a lot of cultural events. So that's why those opportunities that are provided free and open to the public, I really benefited from. And then as I just knew the humanities did not, it proved that I wasn't alone. I didn't feel alone when I read those stories and those other experiences. So that's how I fell in love with it. And it's really, I think we both can say we're pretty fortunate that we get to do what we do, you know, every day. So
Yeah.
we have a first question, and it's for you, Michael.
Okay.
And two-part. The first one is your own work as an artist. You know, what media do you work with?
I'm a painter and photographer.
Okay.
In fact, I was a commercial illustrator as well as studio photographer for years. But I studied studio art as an undergraduate student at the University of Texas at Austin. I love oil paints. I still love oil paints. I love photography, though painting, I keep coming back to it. Trust me, though, if you go into arts management, it gets more and more difficult to keep up your work. Teaching, great, but arts management, you have to struggle.
And then the second part of the question is, um, has the Idaho Commission on the Arts supported work by artists with special needs and disabilities? And I wanted to know if you are acquainted with the student-led work of the Art Ability Project, sponsored by the U of I Center on Disabilities and Human Development.
First question, yes. In fact, there is an incredible program right in Boise called Idaho Parents Unlimited, which is also the VSA Arts affiliate in Idaho. And they do incredible work with children with disabilities and with the arts. I would like to see even more work like that supported in this state. The art ability, I don't know that, and I want to know it better.
Okay.
So I'm glad our participant here brought that up, because I'd like to pursue that.
So don't forget, you can ask questions. Somebody also said thank you for what you said earlier about the STEM and the STEAM. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of leads me to a question. So what challenges do you think we face in Idaho when it comes to the arts and humanities? I'll kind of start by saying that I think sometimes the humanities are viewed as elitist. They are not viewed, they are viewed as not as accessible. And sometimes there is some pushback on that. It's not pervasive or statewide, but there are those sorts of preconceptions. So I'm assuming it's similar, for the arts as well in some cases. So what do you think our biggest challenges are?
Certainly that perception is out there, it's real, and it should not be. Because, for instance, we just announced the next round of recipients of the Governor's Awards in the Arts, and one of these wonderful recipients is a Norwegian rose Mahler. That is an exquisite, beautiful painting form. It's considered decorative art. Why would anybody make a distinction between fine arts and other arts? Mm-hmm. They all work together. For instance, the occupational trades and saddle makers, Nez Perce quill and beaters. All of this fits together. It is one tapestry. Unfortunately, sometimes people draw a distinction to say, well, then a painting of Van Gogh's is some higher level, and it is exquisite. Absolutely, I just crave it. But I also crave that rose Mahler. Yeah. And I had a hat made by an Idaho hat maker, and it was a crown that I had always wanted, and he made it, and it's perfect, and I know it'll last my lifetime. Mm-hmm. There is an art here. We need to break down those barriers to this, so that we all that we see it all as one big meshed tapestry of magnificent arts. When we do that, those social barriers break down, and I have seen those barriers break down in the legislature. Yeah. I mean, we support the Boise Art Museum, the Art Museum of Eastern Idaho, and the Weiser Fiddle Fest, and the Basque Museum, and the festival at Sandpoint, and they have so many different art forms, and every one of them are absolutely magnificent. Or being at the well, I could go on, but yeah. How about you? I mean, what do you see?
No, I completely agree with you. I think that there is that notion that the humanities is like I had said earlier, it's elite and privileged, and I completely disagree. And I think one of the things that we do here, and I know you do as well, is demonstrating how the humanities belong to everyone. It is the human experience, and every story is a part of that. So we have a board, just like you do as well, and they represent the entire state. And those perspectives all come together, and we use that network to talk about something that might be going on in Malad. We support the Welsh Festival down there, trailing of the sheep, or things that happen in Twin Falls, as well as Rexburg and Driggs. So I think it's getting the information out there. I think it is one of those challenges that's always kind of been there, but I also view it as an opportunity. It's that opportunity of going out and demonstrating how the arts and the humanities, and I know you focus on the arts and I focus on the humanities, but I know we talk about both, when we kind of go out, bring us together, that shared common experience, our shared history, and going back to the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities, how that is needed to be respectful to other ideas and other cultures. And I think now, of all times, that is needed more so than ever. And I have seen how our works have contributed to that.
Absolutely. In fact, the various cultures of Idaho. I mean, we have exquisite Korean dancers here, and Mexican traditional dance,
We have
and
Ukrainian dancers.
Ukrainian.
Yep.
Absolutely. This is all part of this wonderful human tapestry. And it goes back again, who tells our stories?
You're absolutely right. Yep.
And there are stories to tell. They're valued, they're valuable. In fact, one of my experiences, not in my youth, but in my adulthood, and it made me go back to my youth. So back in Pennsylvania, before we were coming out here in 2007, Gisela, my wife, said, we haven't been to the Brandywine Museum yet. We've been here for so many years and we've never been to the Brandywine Museum. Now, this is where 3 generations of Wyatt's work is.
Wow, yeah.
So we went to the Brandywine Museum. We've been living right in its backyard for years. And we walked in there, okay, there's these wonderful Andrew Wyatts and Jamie Wyatts. But growing up, I had grown up with the illustrations of N.C. Wyatt in the famous adventure novels, Treasure Island and Robinson Crusoe, all of this. And I'd always, as a kid, I wanted to emulate the painterliness of the illustrations of N.C. Wyatt in all these famous adventure books. And I walked into one of the rooms in that gallery, and there they were, every one of them lined up, the original oil paintings by N.C. Wyatt that were about 6 feet tall. Wow. And I practically did a Snoopy dance. I was a kid all over again. And remembering how much I love these stories and how much those particular illustrations by N.C. Wyatt meant to me as a kid growing up. And I wanted to squeal.
So, no, that's a really good transition, because we have time for this last question, and you're going to have to think of something else now, because the question is, what is an example of an event or program in the humanities and in the arts that has touched you personally in the last several years? So I'll give you a moment to think, and then so I'll kind of share mine. So in the last several years, I've really been fortunate. This is my new home state. I've been here about 3 years. So I really made an effort to travel the state, and see programs. And I would say there were so many, but one that really touched me most recently was the North Idaho Distinguished Humanities lecture that we had last year. And it wasn't the lecture part, actually. Thanks to a generous donation that we received from the Idaho Forest Group, we're able to bring the speaker to high school students. And so we were at Lake City High School this year, and there were about 400 students with Vietnam Nguyen. And listening to him engage, listening to him interact, and the questions that these students had about culture and ideas was incredibly moving and incredibly uplifting. And afterwards, I was reading in the paper how the students, responded by saying how it had changed them as well. And it was something that I really walked away from, just feeling incredibly moved, not only by the author's, compassion and his interest, but then how the students reacted as well. So, Michael, over to you.
Well, I'm going to mention a couple of things that happened, one just a year or so ago, and then another several years back. They're both going to be in Boise, and I'm prefacing by saying that because I don't want this to sound like I'm terribly Boise-centric, but these particular events stand out to me. I have the good fortune in the course of my work to be able to travel the state a fair amount and to go to events and to meet with people on the work of the agency. And I'm deeply moved by many of them. But let me now say that I absolutely love classical music. And early music is my, and jazz too. I love good straight ahead jazz, but early music is wonderful. Okay, three events. This past year, before COVID happened, I had some health problems, and I wasn't able to get out much, but we got out to an event at the Riverside in the Sapphire Room for some good straight ahead jazz, and I hadn't heard any for a while, and I was at a particularly bad moment in my health, and that music was absolutely restorative to sit there listening to some just straight ahead jazz. And that is, as they call it, I know it sounds colloquial, but it's the American classical music, and I crave it. But two other musical events. Here I am a visual artist, but I love music. A year or so ago, Monica Huggett, who is the music director of the Portland Baroque Orchestra, came here to perform with the Boise Baroque Orchestra. Oh, that was exquisite. That was a mesmerizing concert of Baroque music, and I crave Baroque music. And then finally, several years ago, the Boise Philharmonic performed Mahler's Resurrection Symphony. It doesn't get performed very much because it's just big. It's big, it's difficult, it's choral, orchestral, it's massive. And the Boise Philharmonic nailed it. They just nailed it. I don't jump to my feet. I think American audiences are too prone to stand in performances, but I leapt to my feet in that performance. It was so inspiring, absolutely inspiring.
We'll end it on two things. The first is a panelist said that connecting the humanities and the arts to the public at large is longstanding. And even in 1711, Simon During, in 1711, Joseph Addison expressed the desire to bring philosophy or the humanities more broadly out of the closets and libraries, schools, and colleges to dwell in clubs and assemblies at tea tables and coffee houses. So that is our goal, Michael. And I think the last thing I want to say is here's to 2021 and an opportunity for us, everybody on the Zoom call, that with good wishes that we can sit together again, hear wonderful music, hear wonderful lectures, and wish everybody good health. So,
absolutely.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, David. It was a real pleasure. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with you, a kindred spirit.
Absolutely. Right back at you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Next week, we have another one on Tuesday. Just go to our website. You can learn more about it. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night, everybody.